Ukraine's government collapses as Zelenskyy orders dramatic wartime shake-up. Zelenskyy triggers wartime government overhaul as Ukrainian Prime Minister formally resigns. Ukraine has entered a high-stakes period of political transition after Prime Minister Yuliia Svyrydenko formally submitted her resignation, triggering the departure of the country's entire cabinet, while Russia's war continues to intensify. The resignation was formally received on Monday, the 13th of July, by Verkhovna Rada chairman Ruslan Stefanchuk, who confirmed that Ukraine's parliament would consider it under the country's established constitutional procedure. The move follows President Volodymyr Zelenskyy's announcement that he wanted to replace Svyrydenko as part of an extensive wartime government overhaul designed to deliver what he has described as a renewed political strategy. It represents far more than the replacement of one senior official. Under Article 115% of Ukraine's constitution, the resignation of the Prime Minister automatically results in the resignation of the entire cabinet of ministers. Parliament must therefore approve a new Prime Minister and establish a replacement government. The change comes at an exceptionally dangerous moment for Ukraine. Russian missile and drone attacks remain relentless. Kyiv is seeking additional Western air defense systems. Pressure continues along the front line, and the government is already preparing for the possibility of further attacks against the country's energy infrastructure during the coming winter. Zelenskyy is therefore attempting to rebuild the political machinery of the Ukrainian state, while that machinery remains responsible for directing a national war effort. Svyrydenko formally submits her resignation. Svyrydenko's resignation follows Zelenskyy's announcement on Sunday that Ukraine was changing its political strategy and required a corresponding transformation of its leadership. Stefanchuk said Parliament had received the Prime Minister's formal resignation and would now process it according to the appropriate procedure. Parliamentary consideration of the resignation and the formation of a new administration could begin almost immediately. Svyrydenko had served as Prime Minister for approximately 1 year, taking office in July 2025 after previously holding the positions of First Deputy Prime Minister and Economy Minister. She had become one of Ukraine's most recognizable economic and diplomatic figures, particularly after helping negotiate a strategically significant minerals agreement with the United States. The agreement was viewed in Kyiv as an opportunity to deepen long-term American economic involvement in Ukraine while strengthening the country's relationship with Washington. In a statement marking her departure, Svyrydenko expressed pride in having led the government during an extraordinarily difficult period and indicated that she remained committed to serving Ukraine. Her exit does not necessarily mean she will disappear from the upper levels of Ukrainian government. Reports have suggested she could be moved into a major diplomatic post, potentially becoming Ukraine's ambassador to the United States. No such appointment had been formally confirmed at the time of publication. Ukraine is in transition, but there is no power vacuum. The scale of the reshuffle has led to dramatic claims that Ukraine is facing a leadership vacuum. That description overstates the immediate constitutional risk. Although Svyrydenko's resignation triggers the resignation of the whole cabinet, Ukraine's constitutional framework is explicitly designed to preserve continuity. The outgoing government continues carrying out its duties until a newly formed cabinet begins operating. The president, parliament, military command, ministries, and regional administrations also remain in place. Ukraine is therefore entering a period of government transition, rather than becoming temporarily ungoverned. Nevertheless, the political risks are significant. Replacing a prime minister in peacetime can delay legislation, disrupt ministerial priorities, and intensify competition among political factions. Conducting the same process during a war requires Kyiv to preserve command, diplomatic credibility, and administrative continuity while selecting new leadership. The transition will be closely watched in Moscow, Washington, Brussels, and European capitals supplying Ukraine with weapons, funding, and intelligence. Any appearance of prolonged internal division could be exploited by Russian propaganda. Equally, a rapid and disciplined appointment process could allow Zelenskyy to present the reshuffle as evidence that Ukraine remains capable of institutional renewal despite the extraordinary pressures created by the invasion. Why is Zelenskyy reshaping the government now? Zelenskyy has framed the overhaul as part of a wider change in political strategy. The president has indicated that experienced officials could be given responsibility for specific areas of foreign policy, including defense cooperation with the United States and Europe, Ukraine's EU membership ambitions, and relations with countries in the Middle East and Asia. Securing military support is likely to remain the government's overriding external priority. Ukraine continues to appeal for additional Patriot and other advanced air defense systems as Russia launches repeated missile and drone strikes against cities, ports, power facilities, and other strategic infrastructure. The new administration will also be expected to expand Ukrainian weapons production, maintain international financial support, and prepare the country's energy system for another winter of potential Russian bombardment. Domestic governance presents another challenge. Ukraine must continue funding its armed forces, supporting displaced civilians, repairing damaged infrastructure, and advancing reforms linked to its proposed accession to the European Union. These demands must be addressed while a substantial share of government spending remains dependent upon foreign assistance. Zelenskyy has also signaled possible changes within law enforcement leadership. This suggests the reshuffle may extend well beyond the cabinet and become one of the most consequential reorganizations of the Ukrainian state since Russia launched its full-scale invasion in February 2022. Corruption pressure hangs over the overhaul. The government changes also unfold against a background of persistent concern about corruption and political accountability. Ukraine has spent years attempting to strengthen anti-corruption institutions, improve transparency, and demonstrate that billions in international assistance are being protected from misuse. These reforms are not merely domestic political issues. They are closely connected to Western funding, military support, and the conditions Ukraine must satisfy to progress towards EU membership. Recent corruption investigations have placed additional pressure on Zelenskyy's wider administration. Reuters reported that the reshuffle follows political fallout from a major investigation involving alleged corruption at the state nuclear company Energoatom and individuals linked to the president's former inner circle. Those implicated have denied wrongdoing where reported. Zelenskyy may therefore be seeking to demonstrate that his administration is capable of changing personnel, responding to controversy, and imposing greater accountability. Critics, however, argue that repeated reshuffles do not automatically deliver institutional reform. Opposition figures have questioned whether changing senior officials will substantially alter decision-making if power remains concentrated among a relatively small group surrounding the presidency. The effectiveness of the overhaul will ultimately be judged by policy outcomes rather than the number of ministers who receive new titles. Who could replace Svyrydenko? Zelenskyy had not publicly confirmed his nominee when Svyrydenko's formal resignation was announced. Several figures have emerged as possible successors. One reported frontrunner is Sergei Koretsky, the head of Ukraine's state energy company Naftogaz. His experience would be highly relevant as Ukraine prepares to defend and repair its energy infrastructure during another potentially severe winter. Denis Shmyhal, currently serving as energy minister and previously Ukraine's longest-serving prime minister, has also been discussed as a possible candidate. His return would offer experience in administrative continuity, although it could make the overhaul appear more like a redistribution of familiar figures than a fundamental reset. Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov has also been named in speculation. Fedorov has been closely associated with Ukraine's digital transformation, military technology programs, drone development, and attempts to modernize recruitment and defense administration. Moving him from the defense ministry could therefore create another critical vacancy at a sensitive stage of the war. Some Ukrainian political observers have warned that disrupting military technology reforms could carry substantial operational risks. Under Ukraine's constitutional system, the president proposes a candidate for prime minister, but that candidate requires parliamentary approval. Zelenskyy's Servant of the People Party remains the dominant force in the Verkhovna Rada, meaning his preferred nominee is likely to be approved unless serious internal divisions emerge. Once appointed, The new Prime Minister will play a central role in proposing most of the new cabinet. The defense and foreign ministers occupy a distinct position because their nominations are submitted by the president, a reshuffle during an intensifying war. The government's resignation coincides with continued attacks by both Ukraine and Russia, far beyond the immediate front line. Ukraine has intensified its use of long-range drones against Russian oil facilities, logistics networks, and other infrastructure that Kyiv says supports Moscow's military campaign. Russia, meanwhile, continues launching missiles and drones against Ukrainian territory, including port and energy facilities. These exchanges underline why the timing of the government overhaul is so consequential. The new cabinet will inherit responsibility for maintaining weapons production, coordinating foreign military assistance, stabilizing the economy, and protecting the power grid. It must also communicate confidence to a population enduring years of displacement, bereavement, mobilization, and bombardment. There is little room for a prolonged political contest. Ukraine's partners will expect the transition to occur without disrupting existing defense agreements or delaying negotiations over weapons and financial assistance. Russia will be watching for any sign that the reshuffle has weakened Ukraine's internal cohesion. Renewal or political risk? Zelensky's decision carries both opportunity and danger. A successful overhaul could produce a more focused administration, improve coordination between ministries, and place experienced officials in roles that correspond more closely with Ukraine's changing wartime priorities. It could also provide Zelenskyy with an opportunity to remove underperforming figures, respond to public concerns, and demonstrate that senior officials are not permanently protected from accountability. But extensive personnel changes can create uncertainty. New ministers require time to master their departments, establish authority, and build working relationships with military commanders, international partners, and civil servants. Those delays matter when decisions concern air defense ammunition, battlefield logistics, energy repairs, and international financing. The reshuffle may also deepen criticism that major Ukrainian political decisions are increasingly concentrated around the presidency. Ukraine remains a functioning parliamentary democracy, operating under martial law, but national elections cannot currently proceed under wartime conditions. That makes parliamentary oversight, independent institutions, and transparent appointments even more important. What happens next? Parliament must first consider Svyrydenko's resignation. Zelenskyy is then expected to nominate a replacement prime minister. The Verkhovna Rada will vote on that candidate before moving towards approval of the wider cabinet. The outgoing government will continue performing its duties throughout the transition, preventing the constitutional gap implied by claims of a complete leadership vacuum. Attention will then turn to the composition of the new administration, and whether Zelenskyy introduces genuinely new figures or primarily rotates established officials between senior positions. The most important questions will not be answered by the resignation itself. They will be answered by whether the new government can obtain more air defense systems, accelerate weapons manufacturing, protect energy infrastructure, preserve Western support, and demonstrate credible progress against corruption. Ukraine is changing its government while fighting for the survival of the state. That makes this more than an ordinary cabinet reshuffle. It is a test of whether a democracy under sustained military attack can renew its political leadership without weakening its ability to wage war.